I call this session to order, and will you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, are there any changes to the agenda tonight?
Yes,
I hear a voice.
it's me. I have changes.
Okay, Alicia.
I think they're in the right place, so let's give it a try. We want to rescind the retirement of Kathy Lemire
Okay,
and also add an item that would give hiring authority to the superintendent through the end of the school year for non-professional staff.
okay, is this all for like on the consent agenda? Alicia,
Did
you
I-
said yeah.
Yes, did I
Yes.
say it at the wrong time?
No, I just want to make sure that it's clear it's for the consent agenda, not a different item.
Okay, yes, it is for the consent agenda.
Okay, all right, so yours is about rescinding a retirement and then also giving the superintendent hiring authority for, what was the wording?
For non-professional staff through the end of the school year.
Okay, okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion from Alicia.
You also want to add, I can't add, but add
No.
resignation of a teacher.
And I'd also like to make the motion to accept the resignation of Jake Farrell and waive the fee.
Okay. So are we doing this all in one
That would
motion?
be in the consent agenda. It would need to be added to the consent agenda.
Okay, so can we put all of that in one motion? Because we had two different people.
I think we just need Alicia to add it to her motion.
Okay, so I would like to add to my motion that we accept the resignation of, I'm sorry, I can't remember. his
Jake
last name.
Farrell.
Jake Farrell, and waive the $500 fee.
Okay. All right, so I want to make sure I have this clear and that Nick does. So we're changing the consent agenda. We're going to rescind a retirement. We are accepting a resignation and waiving the 500 fee. And we're also giving the superintendent hiring rights for the non-professional staff until the end of the school year.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So I have a motion. Do I have a second for that?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, starting with John.
Aye.
Thank you. Lisa.
Aye.
Thank you. Christine.
Aye.
Thank you. Charlie. Did Charlie say something?
Aye.
Thank you. Patty.
Yes.
Thank you. Alicia.
Yes,
Thank you. And I say yes, and that passes 700. Thank you. Okay. That's it for changes? Then public comments?
All right, so this is Communications Coordinator Nicholas Handy speaking. I just wanted to draw attention before we start public comment to our public participation policy. So if you could please just take a second to make sure you're familiar with the policy and that you understand what's in there before making a public comment, that would be greatly appreciated. There are two ways to make a public comment. I'll first go over the in-person way, and then after we will do the remote way. So if you are in person, obviously we have a setup right in the front of the kind of public area. Walk up, we'll turn on the microphone for you. You can make a public comment that way. If you are remote, you just use the hand raise feature at the bottom of the screen. You press that, we'll get a little hand. We can give you the ability to speak. If you could just use your first, last name, and town of residence before making any public comment, that would be greatly appreciated. So we'll officially open up public comments. Marcia, if we have, both in person and remote, would you prefer to take in person like normal and then remote
Yes, we'll
audience?
do that and try and make sure that we don't take up too much time so that we give the people who are remote also equal opportunity.
Okay. So yeah, folks that are in public, does anybody wish to make a public comment? No? Good. Okay, so we don't have anybody in person, and at this time, I'm actually not seeing anybody on. I do have one online. Jennifer Clark.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, that's fine.
Hi, Jennifer Clark. I live in Jaffrey, New Hampshire. I have kids, 3 kids in the school district. I just wanted to make a quick comment. About masks. I was in the school today for one of my children, and I was there for a good hour and a half. And I was speaking with the vice principal, and I was also out in the lobby quite a bit. This was right at the beginning of the school day. I was in the lobby for the majority of the time. Masks were still required as of today, and I can honestly say the staff was doing their job. They were doing exactly what they were supposed to be doing. They were asking students to wear masks. My issue is the amount of students that I saw without masks. Masks are mandatory in that school right now. And in an hour and a half, I counted 31 students that came through that lobby with either masks pulled down around their chins, masks just not on their faces, and staff having to remind them to go get a mask. I don't want to say shocked, but high schoolers and middle schoolers are what it is. But I do want to give a shout out to the teachers and the staff there for doing what is required of them, asking the students to wear masks. Now it's the students that have to step up.
Okay. Well, thank you.
All right, and that was the only public comment that we have at this time. Just a reminder, we do have a second session toward the end of the meeting, so there will be another opportunity.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, it's time for the superintendent's report.
All right, well, thank you. Tonight's report will cover 2 or 3 items, well, 3 items. We have a packed agenda tonight, so I'll try to be as succinct as possible, but there are some there's dense information in this particular presentation at points, and I'll point that out. So the presentation we'll see tonight, we'll just talk about the state of the district, the ongoing approach that we're taking with informing our parents and community about what's going on or what has gone on over the past year. Inclement weather, we had an inclement weather survey. We discussed that we would come back here and have some recommendations about how to move forward based upon the results of that survey. And then COVID-19 discussion items, just continuing that conversation from last week's meeting. Discussion I'm sure we're going to continue on through the course of this entire year, as we did last year as well, as things change and issues arise. So a couple weeks ago, we had our first 5-minute video go out on communication. Many of you saw that, the communication video talking about what we've done over the past year, really over the last couple of years, and what we're looking forward to doing in the future. And I thought it'd be a good idea to take a look at the second one that went out, the co-curricular video. And for those who are here online, this is something that you'll be able to hopefully hear and see, as well as those individuals here. I know that currently the video messaging on facilities is currently in the works, and so that should come out either later on this week or early next week. This is about 4 to 4.5 minutes.
I'm just gonna play a quick little start because there's just a little musical part. Marcia, if you could just let me know whether or not you hear it, and we can
Okay.
hopefully we can get it both in person and remote.
Yep.
And that's a picture of Nick.
Yeah.
All right, so it's,
Jaffrey Ridge Cooperative.
are you getting anything out of that?
It's not the greatest, but
Okay. Let's see. I'm just gonna do one quick audio tooling real quick. Is that any better?
Jaffrey Ridge.
A little bit.
Has done a lot over the past year to expand co-curricular offerings for our learners. JRS is
we're not seeing the video though.
Yeah, so I'll just give me a moment. Trying to
Just
play
Ruben.
this. All right, so we will go back to a screen share. And we will go to full screen. And obviously, for those in the digital audience, if you do have issues hearing this, it is up on our Facebook page. It's up, it's been emailed out. It's on our YouTube page, which is Broadcast SAU 47. So we'll play it. Hopefully we can hear it pretty decent, and we'll go from there.
The Jaffrey Ridge Cooperative School District has done a lot over the past year to expand co-curricular offerings for our learners. JRMS and CHS alone have over 20 after-school clubs and activities, not counting the sports that we offer in the fall, winter, and spring. Our weight room and wellness academic center are fully operational, giving students an opportunity to expand their health and academics. The district is also working to expand opportunities for elementary learners and has hosted a number of clubs and other opportunities for all grade levels.
As a district, we want to, again, like the motto says, inspire, engage as many students and learners as we can with after-school activities. So we want to listen to student voice, hear what the students are looking for, how we can enhance their learning after school. And again, learning can be in the form of athletics, it can be in form of other clubs, it could be just club sports. So anything that the students are looking for, we try to accommodate because we know that that's what's going to inspire them to fulfill their passion and have success. And if they're having success after school, they're probably going to also have that same success in school. So that's our goal, provide as much opportunity as we possibly can. And really listen to what needs to be going on during the after school.
We decided to increase our focus on co-curricular activities because of the benefits that they offer to our student body. Despite going through a pandemic, we have been able to offer safe socialization opportunities where students connect with others and explore things that they are passionate about. This student-focused approach has already yielded a number of amazing results, including our robotics team qualifying for the state meet in its first year of existence, our volleyball club being promoted to a JV sport and playing its first home game in the Pratt Auditorium this October, having a founder of the Nintendo Club donate a Nintendo Switch gaming console to the club, and our girls basketball team becoming back-to-back Division III champions.
That's the best thing about after-school programming and coming up with clubs. If we listen to the student's voice, they know what's going to inspire them. They know what they really want, and it's on me advisors, teachers to create that atmosphere that allows them to learn probably a little different than what they can learn in the classroom. And it's not saying that one is better than the other, but students know, they have a sense of pride. And I think that's one of the biggest things is, for me, is watching those kids that have started clubs and inspiring other students to join them. And
While we have experienced a lot of growth around co-curricular activities in our district, we are still looking for ways to expand and improve all programming. We have seen a notable increase of participation in sports, so we are looking to expand and offer more JV and middle school opportunities. Because of the success of our girls volleyball team, we will be looking to start a boys team in the spring. Clubs will continue to grow and evolve over time based on student interest. We have already seen examples of clubs, like the Animation Club for example, start with a small interested group of students and evolve into a district-wide opportunity where all schools have had a successful animation club. The district recently surveyed parents, staff, coaches, advisors, volunteers, and others to ask about the importance, benefits, barriers, and vision for our co-curriculars. We are still distilling all of this data into key points that we will use moving forward to assist our programming. If you have any questions or would like to learn more about the exciting opportunities that we have, or if you would like to talk about creating something new, please contact Activities Director Heather Lindstad at h.lindstad@sau47.org.
All right, thank you.
Great.
So if you have any questions, just contact h.lindstad@sau47.org. Thank you, Nick. And so that's very similarly, we'll have 3 more of those going out over the next month or so in 3 other areas: COVID, education, and facilities. Not in that order. Facilities will be next. So we can move on to the survey data regarding inclement weather. So I have a few slides on that and some recommendations as we move forward. And so the survey that we had on inclement weather, what to do with snow days or remote days, we had about 464 people who responded. You can see that it was split pretty evenly between Ringe and Jaffrey, the number of people who responded. There are, because teachers are involved in this survey as well, there's quite a spread of other locations that they might live. The number of parents who have elementary learners was the highest, and then middle school, and then high school. And then we had staff members as well, and other individuals in the community. And we took a look at, the data here. Most of it falls into 3 categories. Red, meaning let's have some inclement weather days. Some days should be remote, some days should be snow days. Blue, all of them should be snow days. And yellow being all the days should be remote days. So you can see that over half feel that there should be some remote, but a good third of individuals say, let's have snow days all the time. And then there are a variety of other answers that came out of that saying, let's have a remote day, but make it asynchronous rather than synchronous. I would prefer snow days, but if they have to be if they have to be added on to the end of the year, then definitely let's try to do some remote days. That was a lot of the conversation. A lot of conversation about remote days with a delay, similar to what we did last year. So when you look at all the comments and so forth, that's kind of where it all fell into place in those categories. So a recommendation based upon the information was to provide me with the ability to choose snow days versus remote days, meaning we could have one or the other. Weather sometimes is conducive for remote, and at other times it's not. So there are times when, if it's icing out and we have 2 inches of ice, you're not going to have a remote day during that time frame. You're not going to have internet, most likely. And certainly if we have this beautiful, the first snow of the year, foot of powder, then, like we did last year when we had that kind of experience, we took the snow day. Number 2, if we do remote days, they should be as we did last year. This was really the majority of people who had said remote days were putting this as that kind of caveat, that whether it was a teacher answering that we need some planning time, or other people saying 6 hours of screen time is too much, or whether people said that we need time to be able to remove snow or slush from our cars or other things. Basically, that interim remote day gave 2 hours of prep time to do what you needed to in the morning to get prepared for the other 4 hours of the day. So it's a 2-hour delay, but it would be also with remote. The idea of having our pre-K learners and our kindergarten learners, both of whom many or most have not actually had this type of experience. Some of them, this is the first school experience they've had, and trying to have parents really, sit their kids down, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds down in front of a screen, and to try to get some sort of direct instruction. It works for some, not for others. We do find that there is value in our youngest learners, that whole birth to 5 mindset with being outside, going out, exploring. Certainly if we can give some games, if we know ahead of time that something's happening, or objects for them to play with and so forth, but trying to not have their day be so structured during this time frame would be a suggestion, and that we don't structure the parents, or in this case, it could also be childcare providers, their time frame, and make it very difficult for everyone. Additionally, I think that it would be for our own staff really very beneficial, because of the diverse needs, perhaps more so than any other area in the district, of our pre-K teachers and their kids that they have this year, especially this year, as things are very different within this COVID environment. And kindergarten always is the greatest span of learners for a variety of, whether it be academic or whether it be social emotionally, that they could use that time to plan, rather than to get online and work with a few students here and there. So that would be a suggestion. And then the elementary remote days will need to be planned in advance. We don't send our Chromebooks home with elementary students every single day. So it would have to be something like what the state had done in the past with blizzard bags, or what some people still do with that. Okay, we expect a storm tomorrow. It's likely that we're going to be trying for a remote day, an interim remote day. We've communicated with that. We're going to send this home just in case. If it doesn't end up snowing, bring it back in. If it does, then you're prepared for the day and you have that the night before. With the middle school, high school, you wouldn't need necessarily that type of, I mean, it would be nice. I think it would be nice if everyone had that type of leeway, but you can't always make those decisions unless that's a decision the board thinks would be good, as in we'll have remote days if it's planned the night before or something to that effect. That could be something that we could write in there. But the middle school and high school learners already carry those back and forth and are used to using Google Classroom and so forth. So at some point in the evening, if we could at least have a conversation about it. We are getting closer and closer to inclement weather time. If we were to make some decisions, that would be great as well. But I understand sometimes people like to deliberate, and that's okay. The next slide, I just give some of the COVID data. This is from the 3rd of December. And you can see that the numbers in New Hampshire are continuing to climb. They're past that number there that is on the screen. And if we aren't, we certainly were over the weekend and at the end of last week. The highest rate of COVID was in New Hampshire in the country. We still do see very similar results with the hospitalizations percentage-wise within the age group of those people that we serve here. We have seen, certainly, if we go to the next slide, we have seen a pretty sizable increase in cases in our local region here in Jaffrey and Ringe, really doubling what we had the last time we connected. Since we have had in the last 14 days, 2 weeks, would be 71 new cases and 45 are currently active. And that number is continuing to climb. Same thing in Ringe, but 45 and 21. And I have the vaccination percentages on to the right. Since I mentioned vaccination percentages, just for those individuals in the audience who are interested, there is a vaccination clinic, I believe, tomorrow at the library in Ringe. And then I believe on Thursday at the library in Jaffrey. And you do not need an appointment. You just need to come in. They're offering the Johnson & Johnson, I believe the Pfizer, at least a booster anyway. And so I think the Jaffrey is in the afternoon, and I can't remember where the Ringe, I think it might be as well, both in the afternoon. Our school, this was as of Friday. You can see that from our matrix, we are hovering around that 10% mark in 3 of the schools, about half that at RMS right now. And so in the yellow, JRMS and JGS was at 10%, a little bit above 10% out due to illness. Some of that's COVID. Some of that is, those are other illnesses as well. And CHS was very close. We can go to the next slide. The last meeting, the board asked if the committee that had been advising this process this year could get back together and answer some questions, take a look at, the process that we have, and perhaps make some recommendations. I think it was difficult to get everyone together in a short period of time. There were individuals who didn't come but gave their information via email, talked to Nick. And then there were individuals who were at the meeting who had dialogue back and forth. Individuals at the meeting, there was representation from the teachers, representation from the nurses. There was a parent or two. How many parents in this one? We usually have a couple parents in this group.
I think that we had two people that were parents.
Two people that were parents. There were a couple individuals who weren't there. Then did we have an administrator there? I don't know if we had any of the school administration.
Yeah, so this is Nick again. So we didn't have any administrators there directly, but administration did reach out and at least indicate some of their preferences. So in some of those categories where we maybe didn't have somebody that was actually at the meeting, we did have at least one person from that group contribute conversation via email.
So the input, basically what I have here is just input that was given. These are not recommendations per se. I took the input and I've made some recommendations, things for us to consider. I think that this will be a longer process, and I think that we have been thoughtful about what we've been doing, and that making sure that we're thorough with our movement going forward. I think that's very important that we continue to do that. But here's some of the information that was tossed out in conversation, that there are high case in New Hampshire right now of COVID. Lots of travel over the holiday, masking to prevent remote learning was, and also I think masking to prevent illness so that people can travel over the holidays as well. I know that there was a parent who had, or two who had connected with me around the Thanksgiving time, that they had to change holiday plans due to some matters involving COVID-19. There were others who said, make no changes, keep it as it is. Others who talked about implementing a rule similar to the elementary rule that we have, similar to what I had proposed the other night about being able to make some adjustments when there's that type of spread or cluster. Cluster being 3, the state defines a cluster of when you have 3 individuals in a specific location. So that's what we've been defining a cluster as well. In the cases that we've had clusters, there have been more than 3. There was conversation about adding staff data to the matrix. Not as easy as it sounds, but there could be some time taken to put that into place. We did have a staff matrix of sorts or category last year that was green, yellow, and red, meaning relatively normal, strained staffing, critical. It wasn't always about COVID. It was just about how things are in the schools. And I would say that we're pretty strained and at times critical on a regular basis this year. This has been really one of the hard, this is in many ways, I think, been harder than last year because of COVID and also just at the aftermath of last year. Certainly remote learning last year, which we're not interested in moving toward if we don't have to, is not, you know, that added its own level of difficulty as individuals come back. There was talk about combining JRMS and CHS data. There was talk about examining the percentages of the matrix. So is 20% too high? I know that one member here, when we originally talked about it, had discussed maybe lowering it to 15% or lower, maybe 10% is what one of the suggestions here was. You know, there was a question about could a category be added specifically for COVID impact? And then there, I think, was some traction with saying, hey, things, what we know now and what we're experiencing now is different than what we knew months ago and we're experiencing months ago. You know, toward the beginning of the year, we thought that when vaccinations took place, that while we were very much sure that that would alleviate symptoms and cause less hospitalization, and it was protecting versus the original, the dominant strand, getting another strand, and we're getting another strand right now. Massachusetts over this past weekend reported that they have the new strand out there. That, you know, the people who are vaccinated do get ill. And for us in this school, if they're ill with COVID, they might not feel that bad. They might feel worse than they normally would if they've been vaccinated. But we still have to follow the same processes as everyone else. So the degree or the severity of someone's illness, we still have to quarantine. We still have to have staff out if their family has been, if we have family members who are positive, if they themselves are positive, and that impacts the school. And so again, the focus of the reopening team this year was to how can we do our best to make sure it's a healthy, safe environment. Safety was defined very broadly, social, emotionally, as well as health, the typical health of being not ill, and making certain that there was as much normality as possible and consistency as possible that way for our learners and for our teachers as well. But the idea of surveying the community again to say, maybe things have changed. Maybe there's a different, I had shown you the information last time, the original survey, it's on our website right now, of the majority of individuals really saying we don't need to have a lot of these mandates, or we can kind of be moderate with our protocols and so forth. And so really it makes sense that we had some very nice public comments last time. I really thank the community. It was very balanced with the comments that we had last week. I think people were well spoken, well prepared. I believe that the conversation modeled what our values were, especially within that are laid out within our communication plan. People were very respectful of each other. And so that was very, very helpful. But I think we need a broader range perhaps of input. And basically, if we move to the next slide, based on feedback, I recommend that we consider the following actions. I still think that an adjustment in the language and the framework, allowing me with some leeway as we do with the elementary schools, that 5 days that we just currently did, that's reasonable. I do think that we should look at last year's agreed upon process regarding the school's ability to function due to staffing. Now, understand that wasn't so much about masking, that was about going remote. So that was different, but see if there's anything there that could overlap or be helpful. Surveying the community, I think that is something we definitely should do. And I think that we should be reporting it back to this team right here. And then I wrote the reason why I recommend that we consider. I'm not saying tonight that we should reduce the percentage of absent due to illness in the existing matrix. I actually am recommending that we don't make that decision tonight, because I think that we need to get more input from community and have more discussion. But I do think that we should consider doing that. And I think that was a good suggestion from the committee that met together. The next slide just shows some suggested language. I tend to get a little verbose when I start writing, so it could probably be a little tighter than this. But basically saying in the event of a cluster or confirmed in-building spread, the impacted building or location, I put location because the idea at the very end, if you read the last sentence, when making the decision to implement a masking requirement, the administration will make every effort to limit the decision to the area of the building impacted by the cluster or confirmed in-building spread. So as not to just say, there was a cluster in JGS second grade, so the entire school masks, that kind of idea. That would be to prevent that. A school principal, very similar language, in consultation with school nurse and the superintendent can decide to extend this beyond the 5-day period based on the school or community transmission data trends. Just something to consider as we later on in the agenda. And this is just for the next slide. This is just last year's decision-making matrix had staff capacity to conduct classes and school operations. There were 3 levels: normal, strained, and critical. And I have principals here tonight, but I would think that they would say, and we have not had a lot of conversation about this, but I certainly see the emails of how they're covering school and classes and everything. This has been a more difficult year than last year, in my opinion, in many ways. And many types of staff, more so this year than last year in this area. They've done a phenomenal job. They continue to do a phenomenal job. I'm proud of each and every one of them. I'm proud of the SAU members who are continuously subbing in classes as well and doing their paperwork and everything at other hours of the day and evening. It's been an all hands on deck approach, and we just have a really great team. But we do have capacity issues. And that's my presentation for tonight.
Okay, thanks very much. So right after the consent agenda, we have a discussion scheduled for the reopening framework. So we can discuss those bits there. There was also, though, some information on the inclement weather. And I don't know if we want to do an action on that. And if so, do we want to do that right after the consent agenda as well. How that? So, board, if anyone would like to weigh in on,
Well, I think we should have a discussion before we change anything.
okay. But should we do that now, or do you want to do it like, let's get the consent agenda done and then have it?
That works for me.
Okay. All right. So, then let's do that. Let's take care of the consent agenda. We've already had the amendments to it. So I'll just take a motion on the consent agenda.
Marcy, I actually need to make one more change.
Okay.
Sorry, I need to
What?
pull the minutes for November 15th, public and non-public.
Okay.
Did you make a motion to accept? No, okay. Well, I'll move that we accept the consent agenda as modified with the minutes for.
Okay, all the modifications.
Yes.
Yes,
Absolutely.
great. Okay, thank you. So that's John, and I need a second.
I'll second Christine.
Christine, thank you very much. Okay, I'll roll call vote. John?
Aye.
Thank you. Lisa?
Aye.
Thank you. Christine?
Aye.
Thank you. Charlie?
Aye.
Thank you. Patty?
Aye.
Thank you. Alicia?
Yes.
Thank you. I say aye. So the consent agenda as amended passes 700. Now let's do November 15th.
I make a motion, we accept the minutes from November 15th, public and non-public.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. I need a second.
Second.
John, thank you. Okay, John,
Aye.
thank you. Lisa?
Aye.
Thank you. Christine?
Aye.
Thank you, Charlie.
Aye.
Thank you, Patty.
Aye.
Thank you, Alicia.
Abstain.
Thank you. I say aye. So that passes 601. Thank you. Okay, now we're up to the discussion. We said we were also going to add to this the inclement weather. So first up, though, is the reopening framework.
Can we do inclement weather first?
You want to get that one done? Okay.
Yeah, we can get that out of the way.
Okay. All right. How about a discussion then for inclement weather action?
Okay, I would support giving the superintendent the ability to choose snow day versus remote day. But I think from a parent perspective, if there's some way that we can add some predictability to it, we already have some predictability. In other words, pre-K and kindergarten will not have a remote learning day. Another one might be that Monday would be a snow day, would not be a remote day because we don't have the ability to have elementary kids take their Chromebooks home. So if there's some way of adding more specificity and more predictability to it from a parent perspective, I think we ought to do that if we can.
I agree, Charlie. I think last year, Ruben's discretion was really effective in my perspective. I think sort of the underlying assumption from a parent's perspective was that if it was an icy snow type of day, that is not very fun to be outside playing in when it is icing all over you, that would be a remote day. Whereas if it was predicted for the snow to be more fun in nature, then it ended up being a snow day. And I feel like really Ruben made the calls pretty well.
In alignment with Charlie, I would agree with those changes. Specifically, I'm curious where it says elementary remote days will need to be planned for in advance. Charlie, I appreciate that the Mondays would be automatic because you wouldn't have the advance, but how much time do you need?
Well, I mean, I understand the Monday conversation, but we do have weather reports that predict quite far out, and they're relatively accurate. So if, for instance, on Thursday, we find out that it's likely that it's going to be snowing, or the weather is going to be, not good on Monday, it is possible for the elementary schools to provide the materials Friday evening. So I think that's why I had said remote days would need to be planned in advance for elementary, meaning that parents would understand at least a day that night before that it is likely to take place, or that it's possible to take place, because the tools, the materials, the computers, whatever, would be sent home to them. So if they have not had those sent home to them, they would not be expecting to have a remote day.
And I recall that there was at least one instance where that happened towards the end of last year. I just remember my kids coming home with their Chromebooks, not on a remote Wednesday, so excited that it's going to be a remote learning snow day tomorrow.
I may have even
So
called it early. If
it-
obviously, if at all possible, you call it early. It's just, we've had so many days in the past several years that you've woken up and gone, oh, really?
Mhm.
And so I'd like to have the forecast be fairly clear that it's going to be doing something.
So the idea
Yeah.
would be to send home materials and Chromebooks with children when they return from school the day before we expect inclement weather.
Yeah.
So-
And are there enough Chromebooks for first grade through 12th grade and chargers now? Like things break, but every child has a device?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, we can even do it for pre-K and kindergarten if we want. I just think that those, when we're talking, because another part of the conversation is making up hours and days and so forth. Pre-K and K don't have those same requirements as well on top of that. Apart from the fact that they're 4.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
I'm in agreement. The whole issue of connectivity and
Mm.
accessibility and equal accessibility. So I know it ranges broadly between Jaffrey and Ridge, and I don't know. It's just something that we have to constantly consider.
It's definitely spotty through the region.
And you're right, ice would affect that.
Mhm.
But
Anyone else?
can I make a recommendation that in advance, so once the decisions are made, if we are going to do some remote, that the remote learning protocols go back out to students so that they are reminded as to the requirements, I don't know.
Yeah, I would want to put,
All the-
I would want to put that language back in the framework, actually. Yeah,
So all the responsibilities that the students have
separate area.
to dress appropriately and be on screen and all the other stuff.
Okay. So if there's not more discussion, then I would take a motion.
All right, I'll make the motion. We provide the superintendent the ability to choose snow days versus remote days for inclement weather. With the guidance that we provide predictability and advance notice to parents as much as possible.
Yeah.
In other words, the last thing we want to do is tell people we're going to go on a remote day at 5 o'clock the day before. Because if you have to stay home from work because your child's home at work doing remote learning, you're going to need enough advance notice to notify your boss you're not going to come into work, those kind of things. So, I mean, it would really behoove us to be as predictable as possible. So my motion is to provide the superintendent with the ability to choose a snow day versus a remote day.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Is there someone who would second that?
Second, Lisa?
Okay, thank you, Lisa. All right, John,
Aye.
thank you. Lisa,
Aye.
thank you. Christine,
Yes.
thank you. Charlie,
Aye.
thank you. Patty,
Aye.
thank you. Alicia,
Yes.
thank you. And I say aye. So that passes 7-0-0. Thank you. So now reopenings framework, or do we want to hit the budget meeting schedule?
Let's do the reopening framework.
Okay.
Well, speak at once.
Yeah, I know. It's like, well, I'm just reminding myself what the actions recommended. Can we go to the next slide as well? Okay. What are people's thoughts?
All right, I'll give you my 2 cents. Okay,
Thanks, Charlie.
I'm okay down to when we talk about in consultation with the school nurse superintendent could decide to extend this beyond a 5-day period. I want to be a little bit cautionary about that because I personally believe that masking is a very important thing to my community. And they're going to want to know the rationale for doing anything. And they want it to be predictable. If it, the matrix was predictable. So I can see that when a principal has to take an immediate response based on one criteria or another, they should have the authority to do that. So I would say that the 5-day period is fine, but beyond that, we need to consider bringing it to the board at the next board meeting after 5 days if you want to extend it beyond that. So that the board would have some input and the parents would have some input and public comment. So we would at least get some feedback on that. The other comment that I'd like to make is that it should be, when it says based on school or community transmission data trends, we already have community transmission data trends. And what I would prefer to put in there in its place is the aspect of the ability to cover the courses so that it's not only a transmission trend for the school, but it's also has to do with the capability of delivering education. And so if in my mind, if a principal feels it's critical to go to masking to maintain the ability to continue to deliver the courses, then they should have the ability to make that decision. I don't know the exact words for that, but that's what the intent is to say, hey, look, we got an issue here. We need to take some action. And we don't want to wait for the board to make any decisions on that. So I guess that's where I'm coming from on that.
So I have a question, Charlie. If the 5 days needs to be extended because the reduction in cases, it's kind of gone flat or it hasn't reduced enough to make the difference or whatever, does that mean if it's not up to the principal in consultation with the nurse superintendent, Does that mean if you want that to go to the board after 5 days, that means we would have, if we didn't have a meeting scheduled within those 5 days?
I don't think that's what I said.
Okay, that's
I
what I'm
did-
checking, because I want to,
If I
like, wait.
If I did, I said the wrong thing. My mind was doing one thing, my mouth another.
Okay.
But no, the concept that I had in mind was that the principal would have the authority to do it for 5 days
Yep,
and extend that after consultation with the nurse and the superintendent beyond the 5-day period, subject to review by the school board at this next meeting. So in other words, that could extend for a long time. It's just that it would provide an opportunity.
oh, we would review that,
Yes.
but they would have the
review that.
ability to do it. They wouldn't have to wait for us.
No, they'd have the ability to do it. And if
Got
it
it.
were, like if it happened tomorrow, it could extend, for 2 or 3 weeks. For whatever scheduled
Until our next meeting.
yeah, or over the holidays, or, I mean.
Right.
the-
Okay.
The whole idea is to provide some public input.
Yep.
To that decision. And that happens during a board meeting.
Yes,
Because-
yeah.
Because board members do represent their constituency. Board members represent the public. They're the only one, frankly, they're the only ones that speak to the public for their community. Everyone else in the administration of the district speak for the district. So anyway, that's,
Okay, thank you. And thanks for the clarification too. Other comments?
Yeah, I have some comments. I just want to start by thanking the committee for providing the board with their recommendations. Myself as a board member, feedback, I'm sorry, with their input, we'll go with the appropriate word. With providing the board with their input as a board member, I really tremendously rely on the varied perspectives of all the stakeholders that are represented in the committee. So thank you. I do think we need to add some clarity on what exactly winter is, whether that be the calendar definition of winter or holiday winter. Again, on going back to Charlie's point, so that people really know what it is that we are expecting, and we can be really clear about what that looks like. Even if it's through January, just something that's a little bit more concrete. Winter can be a pretty broadly defined span of time. I just want to also clarify, when it comes to any mitigation strategies, JRMS CHS is considered one school, but not combining their data. I guess I'm confused by that because depending on that in-school transmission, I guess it just doesn't completely make sense to me. One school could be in the red, but that wouldn't mean any mitigation strategies for another because it's still individualized. I feel like I need more
Yeah, so
clarity on that.
when I think that was thought of at the very beginning of the year. Yes, Nick?
Yeah, so again, Nicholas Handy, communication coordinator, also a member of the committee. So the thought process, I guess, to go back to the winter point first, it was just a discussion. A lot of these were just discussion points. It wasn't necessarily anything that got voted on or anything that was like, we like these ideas, we don't like those ideas. Due to the amount of people that we had there, it became more of a brainstorming session rather than like, these are the things that we necessarily want to bring forward as a formal recommendation. So when it comes to winter, we didn't really get into the nitty gritty of how long winter would or wouldn't be. It was more just an idea that somebody had brought up as, hey, this, given the state of current data trends, given some of the things that are going on, masking for a period during the winter could be a good idea. When it comes to the data versus rules conversation, a lot of it, so originally the conversation was the idea around combining the schools because it was similar to the discussion we had last Monday, the idea of, you may have an impact at Conant High School, but there could be some sharing of spaces, buildings, et cetera, that could lead to, middle school, high school students, staff crossing paths. So being able to make rules that were a little bit more inclusive And then we had talked about combining the data and just reporting out one number for the middle high school. And the conversation led to keeping the data still separate so that people could still track, okay, we had a cluster at the middle school and that's impacted our percentage. So we're up around 12% and we're only at 4% in the high school. We're still going to do something all encompassing throughout the building because it's one building, but we're still giving people that individual data so that you can see that it's more of a middle school specific trend. Does that help kind of clarify a little bit for you?
I will also say there are some locations in the building that are more secluded. And so it is possible that or isolated, I guess you could say, from the rest of the population. So there is a possibility that depending, in a couple locations that you could actually mask a very small portion of the school than the entire thing. That's not a very high percentage of spaces, but there are one or two.
Okay, it needs to be really clear that any mitigation strategies are building wide across the two schools, whereas the data collection is individual.
Whereas if we were to, for instance, last year, we focused a lot on the remote, right? Because we were masked all the time anyway. We would specifically say, all right, 6th grade would come to school and the rest of the school would go remote. We would choose what we could. So we would always try to keep as many people in school as possible. We'd target a specific group. So again, it's a little different, which is another piece of that conversation with the staff. We were talking two different things last year. This year we're talking, mask, no mask. We want to stay in person, not be remote. Then last year it was all about, are we going to go remote? We're going to stay in person, all that kind of stuff. So that's why we didn't do school-wide things all the time, decisions all the time last year, because it was really about, we were able to kind of isolate, oh, we have a pocket of teachers here that aren't able to do this, so let's go remote.
Yeah, I guess it would be helpful to have a better method of tracking and understanding the staff data side of things. I get that there are difficulties around that, but I think in order to understand the impact that our current staffing situation is having on our learners, we have to be able to know what that looks like. And my last comment, and I have a lot, is we absolutely need to survey the community again and bring that feedback back to the ad hoc committee with some, I guess, firmer recommendations.
Thanks, Alicia. Other comments?
How quickly do we know? It's the state that identifies a cluster, is that correct?
Well, that's why, yes.
And how quickly do we get that information?
So we would know ahead of time whether we've had a certain number of cases. Our nurses have been pretty good, even though a lot of the contact tracing rules and so forth have kind of gone by the wayside. They've picked it up to finding out, when I get information, I know what bus these people are on, I know what sports they're on, I know what clubs they're in and stuff. That comes across in the emails to me all the time, because we're always looking for patterns. And so someone might say, oh, we got 2 and they share a similar experience here, so let's wait to see if that third does take place. We could, knowing that a third happens, that we could just assume that's going to be considered a cluster. There are some, I don't know all the information that the state makes as a decision, because we've had situations where we could have had a cluster, but it seemed like there were 3 cases that were really kind of outside of school. It wasn't really part of the school itself. And so we never, we wouldn't go along with that. But if we say, oh, we have 3 cases and they're all in one specific first grade, it's going to be a cluster. We would have already, probably, if we knew there were a couple cases already in that class, we would have already sent a letter home at that point in time, typically, and letting them know, just be on the lookout. And then what happens with a cluster is the reason why we mask. You're like, oh, well, why mask if you already have had the cases in there anyway? Well, because if you have that spread, it's likely that others haven't had the symptoms or haven't been tested already. So they're all still coming to the classroom. And we have found with at least one other cluster that then next day, another person's out, next day, another person's out, could be 4 days, right? Since an exposure. And so that's why we would be doing that, to stop that pattern within that area.
All right, thanks, Christine. And Ruben, other comments?
Yeah, Lisa.
Yep.
I feel like we're fighting the wrong battle. I feel like this has just gotten out of hand. This summer when we talked about and really delved into why we would have masks and universal masking and not having masks, I remember the conversations were predominantly about, well, last year we never had anything remotely like a cluster. That was really out of our realm. We'd never had anything like that. We had very few cases, and that was brought up a lot, that last year we had so little here that we really went on that. I feel like we've taken masking and made that the be all and end all end game we can't have, when the truth is we have to do everything we can to not go remote again. That's our end game. I feel like we are so worried about the masking portion that we're forgetting the fact that next week the governor could say, this is we're done now. We're shutting everything down again. That could happen tomorrow. That's how bad our caseload is right now. That's how scary this Omicron thing is. You know, we don't know enough. And I feel like we're so focused on masking a portion of a school that has 200-300 kids in it that might be eating together, might be having recess together, might be having sports together after school, certainly siblings. I don't get it. If we're going to mask a school because we have a cluster, we should mask a school. We shouldn't mask a corner of it. They're going to mix and mingle. Buses everywhere. I feel like we're focused on the wrong thing. We need to keep the kids in school. Masks is one way we have the ability to help that in some form. I don't understand why we're nitpicking on masks.
Thank you, Lisa.
I just want to clarify, I am not against masks. I just think it's important that we as a board ensure that our community understands what the expectations are, so that we have the support of the community behind us. So I agree. We do not want to go remote again. I don't want to go remote again.
I don't think anyone does. Anyone else?
Yes.
John, yep, go ahead.
I appreciate Lisa's comment. I don't think we're at the point where we're about to make the jump that Lisa's suggesting, but I very much appreciate her reminding us that we did wear masks all last year and a lot of good stuff happened. We had kids in school 4 days a week. So as we go forward, I think we have to give some thought to what makes the most sense and how we keep our kids in school.
All right, thank you, John.
Okay, it's me. This is Patty, and I agree with the recommendations with regarding adjusting the framework to include the middle and high school, and to also keep their data separate. So treat them the same, but keep their data separate. I think also that I do want to see the staffing added to the matrix, and I appreciate the thoughts around that, and I think that that's really important based on last year and determining whether we can operate safely in whatever way. I agree with surveying the community. I think that's really important, and I hope that the community appreciates the impact of what it means to have people out on quarantine, and it's just as bad. It's just as bad to have a kid out for 10 days as to have them, granted, imagine quarantine not being sick and some being sick. It's very disruptive to their educational process. I'm not certain about the reducing the percentage of absence due to illness, so I'm gonna put that aside because I don't know how the percentage was chosen. So I can't base I don't know whether it should be 15 or 25 or 20 or whatever. I wasn't there for the discussion, so I don't have an opinion on that. I do think that having the administrators make the decision about masking is crucial. The words boots on the ground come to mind, and I think that they really see it firsthand. I'm concerned with Ms. Clark's comments from earlier today in terms of compliance. I think I mentioned that last week, that I was concerned that how we were going to maintain respect for the rules of the school. And I think that that's gotta come from expectations at home, that students show respect for the rules of the school, and the students need to follow through. And I want our teachers to teach, and I don't want our teachers to be home monitors and mask monitors. So it would be great if, once a decision is made, everyone can comply, because it's in the best interest of the health of the community, meaning the educational community, the learning community. And that would ensure safety of our teachers and staff, support staff, and the administrators. So those are my thoughts. And I do think that keeping things on a cyclical basis where the administrators are making the decision is crucial. 5 days, revisit, 5 days, revisit. It can change. It may get better. It could get worse, but it might get better. So I don't think we should make a blanket decision for many months. Personally, I think it's better to keep it fluid.
Right. Thank you, Patty. I think all the board members have spoken except for myself, so I'm just double checking that. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that the language needs to be adjusted in the framework, that it shouldn't have been specific to elementary. It should be all the schools. Overall, I think the suggested language works. I understand what Charlie was saying, that, yes, do that, but we need to also check in at the board meetings and give opportunity for community to also address it. We definitely need to do another survey. We also I want to hear more from that committee, and I recognize that we gave them such a short period of time, but I would like them to, once survey's done, take that information, look at things a bit more, and then also look at the percentage in that committee and see what they recommend that's coming out of that. So I think there might be like a few bullet points that we want to say, here's the things we really want you to focus on with that committee. And I think that we need to see and have the community also see, what's going on with staff. Because I know that there are comments about, students and sitting in the library and playing games and not having a teacher. And that shouldn't be. I understand if we're in crisis, it is, but I think we need people need to see that we're in crisis. And I think that was last year, and we're not seeing it as much this year. So I would like to see that teacher component in there so that we're all aware of a bigger picture. So that's kind of my 2 cents. I like the fact that we can target a specific area like we have done, saying here's a cluster, how can we address that cluster, and make as little impact as we can to restrictions. So those are my thoughts. So I don't know if there's a motion that someone would like to make.
So what I'm hearing is that we have provided the superintendent with a lot of information and a lot of requested language in the change to the reopening framework. So I guess if it were me, what I would do is I would make a motion to provide the principals with the authority, an interim authority to implement mandatory masking for a period of at least 5 calendar days until such time as we're able to get the changes into the reopening framework, language changing the reopening framework.
Based on the surveys and the ad hoc committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
know. Does that make sense?
Ruben,
I mean, I think that helps immediately. I mean, I gave the suggestive language because I don't think it's really a change to what you've already decided to give as authority with other, portions of the district. And so I was just trying to make it across the entire district. I'm fine with the 5 days and just, I think I don't think it needs to be an interim thing. I think it's already in place for a portion of the population. It's something we've already done. We've done this process with the elementary schools on two occasions. We have it is, I mean, this language is only really what DPHS is going to suggest that we do in that area. That's where this came from. They might say 10 days, but 5 to 10 days. That's the information that we've been provided as recommendations when that happens. An outbreak, something maybe we want to talk about later on, is an outbreak. If we ever have that take place, what goes on? I mean, DPHS would say you are masked at that point in time. And of course, we have the right to not do that. But again, that's we're just talking about the things that are happening that are more likely.
Mm-hmm. So I think
but if it's up, those are my thoughts.
So I think when Charlie was saying interim, meaning that for now this is the change, and that when we get the feedback there may be a further change. I could be wrong. Charlie is.
Yeah, the language as written, I cannot support. For the two reasons that I gave. Okay, there is no board review. And also language includes community when it should also address another reason for the principal to extend beyond the 5 days, which has to do with the ability to deliver classes.
Yeah, and I think it would be great to add those pieces in.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure, that.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why we came with last week with the idea, the concept of, hey, our patterns have changed. We're not interested in, and it did affect our staffing, and we're not interested in going further down that road. So let's stop the pattern. That was what the whole idea was. So staff, I agree 100% about the staffing piece to have in-person school. And the board thing, we do it anyway, so why would that be a problem?
So with those changes to the language, I'd support it.
Charlie, I know you've gone over this twice, but could you just one more time clarify these changes where we didn't that? We're talking about where it's on this screen here that we're looking at, right?
Okay, if you read the language, the proposed language, suggested language,
Yep.
all right, when you get down to 5-day period based on school, you cross out the community, and just say school transmission data trends and or the ability to deliver classes. And this authority will extend, in other words, I should say this is okay, this authority will extend until they decide to stop it, the principal decides to stop it, or it's reviewed by the school board.
Okay.
I mean,
All right, so that's a little bit different than what I thought you had said, just for, because you asked me. I wouldn't take the community trends out. I understand why Charlie would say community trends, because we already have that community trends, within the matrix. Are you in the red or the green or whatever? Because I'm thinking community trends very differently. What I mean by, if we go back to this slide, Nick,
Numbers from
like-
this past week.
like 2 or 3, maybe slide 2 or 3. It has the New Hampshire confirmed COVID-19, like the cases, the one where I put the little circles. Yeah, that one. So that's community or statewide data, I guess you could say. If for whatever reason, it wasn't necessarily the number of cases that increased, we know the numbers of cases are increasing. We know people are getting sick. But if, like, for instance, out of that data, hospitalizations, or we were finding that kids were having, problems with because of this new variant or whatever like that, I wouldn't want to wait for us to have to wait for that to take place within our school. If we find that in the, what's going on is affecting the population that we're talking about differently than what it currently is affecting. That was what I meant by that. I understand that's very specific. I wasn't thinking about like numbers of cases, because the numbers are going up and they're going to go down and they're going to go up again and so forth. But what's happening as a result of that? I mean, personally, I would say we should be concerned about, hospitals not having the capacity and so forth. But if I just narrow it down to our population of kids right here, and then I'm going to be interested in, is there a shift in data in that area that would make us say, okay, we got to act fast, that type of thing. And maybe that's just simply a quick emergency board meeting, and that could take care of that as well, if that's a whole different pattern or different trend that has taken place. And maybe if that took place, what I'd do is I'd cancel school for a day and then come back to the board or something like that, if I didn't have that authority. But I would want to act fast if we saw that there was something different happening than what's taken place over the last year.
Well, Ruben, I appreciate the discussion because, sort of like Charlie, as I read that community, the statement that say, or community trends, I wasn't completely sure what you were referring to. And that the discussion helps a little bit. So
yeah,
I think I would agree that that's a major decision.
Mhm.
And I think that the board has demonstrated that they can get together within a matter of hours anyway. So I still would say that from a community perspective, okay, we should be able to focus on the data that we have, the students that we have, the locations that they're in, and our ability to deliver in-person training, in-person instruction. So, I mean, if I look at it right now, we have, from a community perspective, looking at the state numbers, we have more people, more cases now than we are having.
Mhm.
We're relying on that to trigger things. It has nothing to do with our local conditions at all. I would rather rely on sensing of local conditions by our administrators. By that, I mean, within the confines of our school district. I would have no problem with emergency meetings saying, hey, look, we gotta do something.
Yep, that's
But
fine.
before that happens, I would expect the administrator to recognize that something needs to be done and do it quickly.
So can we go back to the language? So where it says community transmission data trends, was there any clarifying language you wanted there? And does it say school or does it say school and?
Or, says or.
I see it says or, I'm just asking. Based on the conversation. Or do we want to?
I'm fine with the language that Charlie had proposed.
Okay,
But I believe he used the word or. I think or is a good word to use rather than having everything have to take place all at once with ands.
okay.
Given that this is a live document, would it be beneficial to have Charlie just reread that change, have me type it in, and then people can look at it to make sure they're okay with it, so we can make
Yep.
a motion?
Type it right
That'd be
in there.
great. Back to you, Charlie.
I didn't hear it, but I don't know.
You didn't hear what I said?
No.
He's just gonna type in right up front so people can see.
I said, would it be more beneficial to everybody to just have you repeat the section that you had said right here? I can just type it into the actual PowerPoint, then people can look at it, see if they're okay with it from that perspective, then we can make a vote on it.
Sure. Sure. I just crossed out or community.
It was data trends, right? Yeah.
School transmission data trends and ability to deliver
Instruction.
instruction.
And just as a point of clarification, because this is how it does say it up here, this paragraph would be replacing the elementary school paragraph that we currently have in the framework. And then the secondary half of your motion deals with having a survey, ad hoc committee meeting to reapproach some recommendations based on the conversation had today. And then would eventually come back to the board, and then this and other things could be readdressed.
Yes.
Okay.
And extended, then another sentence is the extended
The administration will make every effort to limit the decision to the areas of the building impacted by the cluster or confirmed in-building spread.
so
The extension will come back to the board, or at the next board meeting, the board would review, or what?
yeah, I just, after trends, I would put in something like this extension beyond 5 days will be reviewed at the next scheduled board meeting or next board meeting or something like that. The whole idea here is give them 5 days and they can extend it as long as they want, as long as during that extension, the board has an opportunity to review it and get public input.
Okay, and then just get rid of what I said down there, yeah.
My suggestion, just as I, it goes back to our earlier conversation on and or. The school data trends, we have and ability to deliver instruction. Could we have,
Or,
could we have that be an or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
all right. How are people with that? Anything else? Any other comments? Or this is Charlie's motion and we're ready for a second.
All right, so I'll make a second.
Okay,
And,
John? You
Okay,
second
I'd
that?
like Yeah, I'd like to make a comment.
Okay,
I think it's important that we move forward here, and so I'll support this motion. But I'm a bit disappointed in it, really, because I feel like we should be relying more on our superintendent and our principals at this point. I just really feel like they've shown us over the past year and a half that they're very sensitive to community concerns and also paying closer attention to the data and to the shifts in our understanding of this disease than most of us are doing. So I appreciate Ruben saying that, you know, if he had to, he could cancel school for a day. That's part of his authority. Heaven knows, I'm sure that that's about the last thing he would ever want to do. And anyway, I'll support the motion, but I wish we had given, I prefer something that gives the superintendent more authority in the matter.
And has the authority to ask for it.
I think, again, going back to what Charlie's intent was, it was about giving opportunity for community to have a voice. And at the board meetings where it says review, there's public comment opportunity. And so that's where we would hear all of us collectively from community members. I think that was the intent there, not to take away from Ruben, but to give voice.
May I make a rejoinder?
Yeah.
That seems reasonable, especially in terms of being sensitive to the community. But one can be overly sensitive to the community. It's not fair to expect the community to have the knowledge or the resources that the school district has to make assessments.
Mhm.
To make this kind of an important decision too heavily dependent on the feelings of those of us who are less informed is, yeah, I think it's problematic. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. Any other comments? Or I think we're ready for vote. Okay. John?
Aye.
Thank you. Lisa?
Aye.
Thank you. Christine?
Aye.
Thank you, Charlie.
Aye.
Thank you, Patty.
Aye.
Thank you, Alicia.
Yes.
Thank you. I say aye. So this modification to the framework carries 700. Okay. Guess we're up to the budget meeting.
Well, so the budget meeting was going to be, I misread this, was going to put this in, or it is, in the budget overview, but basically several of the administrators, when we made this schedule originally, were available on this coming Saturday for a meeting. Since that time, we've been booked into other locations that we have to be at. And due to some of the information that I have in the proposed budget draft, namely around the default budget, I think it would be best if I didn't have other people be in the leading the conversation about, what possible models or other possibilities we would have if we ended up with a default budget. So I would propose that if at all possible, we meet not this coming Saturday, but the following Monday instead. I think we'd meet for the same amount of time that we normally would on that weekend. We might be able to finish everything on that Monday. We do have a snow day for the following, Saturday, but that would be my hope that we would be able to do that.
Is there a
So
set
that's
time?
next Monday.
It'll be next Monday. Start time 6, 5, whatever people would be able to do.
To be determined then.
Well, as the, whatever the earliest, I think would be better, because I'm sure we have a lot to have a conversation about. Warrant articles, things of that nature.
So I have no objection to. Earlier was better for me too.
Mhm.
All right,
Yeah.
anyone?
Earliest I could do would be 4:30.
Anyone else discussion?
4:30 is fine with me. It's just,
4:30
it's a
was
matter
fine.
of what other people are able to do.
Well, how about if I just go down the list? John, what time? Can you do Monday and what time?
Before we do that, Marcia, we have a budget committee member who might have a conflict or wants to say something on this
Okay,
point.
okay.
The request would be that it'd be 5 instead of 4:30. That would be helpful for that member.
Okay,
So before the board talks about it.
okay.
And perhaps we should ask the other.
All right, so is it okay just to quickly go down and see what time? So, John,
So it's 5 o'clock would be fine with me.
okay, Lisa,
5.
Christine,
5 would be fine.
okay, Charlie,
Anytime.
okay, Patty,
5 would be fine.
Alicia,
5 works.
okay, it's fine with me. So we approved that budget meeting schedule, so we need to have a motion to change that.
Make a motion that we change the budget meeting that was scheduled for December 11th and move it to Monday, December 13th, starting at 5 p.m. With the snow day continuing for the 18th as previously determined.
Okay, thank you, Patty. I need a second.
Second.
Whoop.
I'll
Pick
second
someone
it.
there. Okay. Was that Christine?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, John,
Yes.
thank you. Lisa,
Yes.
thank you. Christine,
Yes.
thank you. Charlie,
Aye.
thank you. Patty,
Aye.
thank you. Alicia,
Yes.
thank you. And I say aye. So the schedule has been changed to the following, till next Monday. All right, overview.
All right. Nick, actually, could you go back to the agenda for a second? I just want to check something out before I go do this. Yep, okay, great. Thank you.
Whoop, wrong slide.
All right, so this is meant to be an overview, not to be a deep dive into anything. All board members and all members here have several documents that they've been provided prior to this meeting. Certainly, there's another week to look at these things as well as we prepare to have conversations next Monday. We knew we had a lot on this agenda. So what I wanted to go over was the 2021-22 approved versus what we are proposing for this course of the year, a little bit of the process of how we've been able to get here, and also the barriers that we have faced. And then just a quick conversation about warrant articles, but I'm sure that next Monday is where we'll have a lot more conversation about them. So this first slide is just a slide. We won't spend a lot of time on it, but looking over the past 8 years, kind of where we have been with the general fund and with our revenues. And you can see that sometimes we've gone down, sometimes we've gone up. We've had a good history of returning money to the taxpayers. Last year was no exception. We have had, I would say, a couple of years where the budgeting and how we've gone about using the budget through the years because of COVID has been interesting, to say the least. We've been able to receive federal funds that have helped us. And so that's been a factor as well. So this year, when I say that this year, which is not highlighted up there, has been more difficult in so many ways. Really, this budget conversation is not exempt from that conversation. So if we go to the next slide. So last year's general fund, and I tend to focus on the general fund. This does not include revenues. Revenues, we're budgeting up 25,000 more than we have in the past. You can take a look at that. But where this impacts the taxes right here is that we would propose a budget of a general fund budget, sorry, of approximately 26,305,000, 306,000 around there, which is a little bit over a 4% increase. Our target from the Finance Committee was to get around a 2.8% increase. That's been difficult. I do think that as we have this conversation, I can talk about some areas where we definitely could decrease this proposed budget. It does mean some specific moves that we would have to make in order to do that, though. This next slide, again, is really the same thing, but now just kind of breaking it down. You do have some documents that would give you this information, but it's nice to look at it in a visual. And you can see that the SAU, we're doing so well in the SAU. That's not really us. That's just that the bond payment has gone off the books. And so you see that decreasing there. Everything else going up. Salaries and benefits to a degree. But I would say, though you can't really see it as this massive amount, it doesn't seem that big. Sometimes pictures can be deceiving. Student services up 1 million, a little over 1 million. Facilities up about 150,000, and the schools combined, most of the increase being at the middle high school, would be up around $91,000 there. It is important to communicate to the budget representatives here, as well as to the community, that first, salaries and benefits, does not include any salary apart from movement on the salary schedule, for instance, horizontally, if they have a master's degree instead of a bachelor's plus 30 or something like that. It does not include JREA or teacher increases. It does include some health insurance increases that we are already known, but not salary increases, as this is the final year of that contract. We look at the default. In the past 2 to 3 years, we've been able to look at the budget, find data, trends in spending to be able to cut the budget that was proposed without really losing the substance of what we're trying to do, and actually come in below the default. We started this year off with saying, what is it that we need? Every year we start that off. What is it that we're really looking for? Is it that we've needed? And we've been able to figure out through those trends to be able to get what we've needed. And, and that's been great. We've done a really good job in that area. This year we started about probably $1.5 million to $2 million higher than where we are currently. The Finance Committee had made some recommendations saying, keep on going back. We did find out that there was a glitch in our new software that was a mistake. So we were able to take a couple $100,000 out of there. That was, not, it shouldn't have been there. There was some double counting of benefits. So that was part of the process, that first number. That's why I say $1.5 million to 2 million, because some of that wasn't like legitimate. The other amounts, like facilities specifically, was about $1 million higher than what we have proposed, in that our facilities director has informed us. He's had individuals come in and look at items. He's done his own inspections, having been in the construction style business before for many years, owning his own company and so forth. He would say, and it's true, we've been talking about this for years, that we have aging facilities. And so fixing those facilities, it's cheaper to do so now than it is to keep pushing it off. Now, we do have another conversation down in this presentation that addresses some of that, even though we removed some of that money from the budget here. Basically, in facilities, we are flat funded. If you go back to the previous slide, even though it's 150,000 up, all your utilities are going up. And there are utilities here that aren't mentioned, trash removal, a variety of different things. Anything that we are spending has increased this year. I think everyone understands that. Certainly when fuel becomes the price that it is, it impacts everything. It impacts materials, it impacts aluminum for doors, for instance. So propane, electric, the biomass, all of that is impacted that way. And so that 150,000 above is really just to continue to do business as is. And this budget is really to do, for the most part, with the exception of a couple items that I'll talk about, is to do business as is. We had originally, we've been talking for a couple of years, and really even on the summertime, wanting to have a plan for a succession plan for HR, but also to get HR more support. Certainly these last 2 years have been probably it's been more difficult for that part of the organization than really any part of a business office. And I say business office meaning special ed, superintendent's office and so forth, because of the isolation of it, only having one member in that area, and also just the sheer the magnitude of legal information that had to be acquired last year in particular. It's been very tough. So we recognize the need to be able to strengthen our ability in that area, and also to improve our hiring practices and everything going along with that. That being said, positions like that we removed from this original budget because though we put some money in there to invest in the people that we already have, right now and to strengthen that and keep us going and to find other ways to get that support. We don't feel adding another 75,000 or so to this is going to be the key. Partly because of the conversation around the default budget. If we start adding positions and we say, all right, but if the default budget means reducing positions, then why would we have added positions in the first place? It's not necessarily what we absolutely need. We had to go with a budget that we felt we absolutely needed. So if we go to the next one again, you can see that there's a 730,000. This number can decrease and increase by 10,000 here and 10,000 there over the next week or so as some new data comes in. But around a 750,000, $750,000 difference between those two. So the increases, and it increases the default as well because the default's above last year's approved operating budget. We've had some pretty hefty increases, and so special education tuition costs have gone through the roof. And when I say we've budgeted what we needed, we have budgeted conservatively, and I can say that pretty with a straight face, as we look at $1 million over in special ed compared to what we have had in the past. We haven't received the increases in most of our areas. We're pretty much thinking flat or maybe a 1 or 2% increase in funding. In New Hampshire, that certainly has not been the case so far, with a 200% increase in the location that we pay the most at in the first place. I can't say a whole lot more about how many of those we have or who and how long that's going to be on the book, but that we're paying for that right now. We're finding money in our budget right now. Now, fortunately, we do have some areas that we can draw from, but it was not budgeted for last year, and it was a pretty hefty hit that we know is going to continue on for next year. We could be paying upwards of 800,000 for a specific individual, one individual, and that is unheard of. We've never talked about that before. Psychological services. We're not talking about what I believe we actually could utilize in this day and age for social, emotional wellness and a higher level of support. I'm talking about what we need to make sure that we are legally in good order. And so we have it's almost impossible to in our circumstance to hire psychological services as school psychologists, because they can now demand a whole lot more. And so we're very blessed to have very efficient, very strong psychological service right now, where they're doing a phenomenal job, all the testing and the retesting and so forth. But they cost a lot of money. That has increased. Part of that is we're also losing someone who's been with us for quite some time, and this is her last year as a part-time individual. There are some staff salary increases to just support the staff and the infrastructure that we do have. There is really, in some of that, we're talking about, I'll give you just an example. We have individuals, hourly employees, people who are non-exempt in the SAU business office that are making what was the average salary in that area. We stay very closely, we monitor that. Those averages are no longer the averages. And the board gave me some hiring authority tonight, and I will be hiring Courtney Edmond to be our student service administrative assistant, so we have had for special education that we haven't had a person in here in that position this year, or at least for several months. So positions like that, if we're going to hire, we have to hire at the right rate, but we have other individuals who might be already in the system at a lower rate than that, and that is difficult when you're talking about equity across the system. So that's what I mean by taking care of the staff we have and make sure that we're retaining. I think retaining staff is important this coming year. This is something to celebrate, to be honest with you. It's the happiest news I had over the last month was we had a 3.2% increase in health insurance. The reason why I say that's great is because the average was over 6% with the style of services that we get, and the maximum was 9%, and the low was exactly where we were. So again, the negotiations, the work that this district has done, HR, the school board had an enormous role to play with that, 6 years ago. You've had years of very good management of those increases in those rates, but it is going up between 80 and 100,000. Depends if you're looking at a group or the whole, a little over 100,000. This right here, when I say what we budgeted, what we need, this is an arguable topic, STEAM and world language. I think it's what we need. It's where we've made progress and we've decided to go last year. Our world language would like to have some digital curriculum, and it's actually not very expensive. That would, over the next 5 years, give them some structure, and that's in the middle school because we didn't really have anything. We increased that programming in the middle school. The STEAM, we're just, we're going full steam ahead. Our numbers show that people are interested in STEM work. Our art teachers, our art classes are full. They want to continue in that secondary level to join in with the science and technology to do more. And so with our next year 2 implementation of the new construction trades programming, along with some other aspects of getting the right equipment for our STEAM programming that we currently have, it costs a little bit of money there in the tune of about 50,000 or so. I already talked about utilities increasing, costs everywhere are increasing, and then transportation later on tonight. So we have a lot to do tonight. We got to talk transportation costs. Over the last, since I've been here, 6 to 7 years, we've not been flat, but we've been pretty steady, and we have not had big increases. We've had very small increases. Transportation increases are inevitable. We have some numbers that we're going to show you tonight. They seem like, wow, that's a huge jump. And it is a huge jump, but it still keeps us very much under market value. And to go out to bid, as you have the right to do, I would think would be a very foolish thing to go forward, as there's no way it's going to go well if we have to go out to bid for a busing contract right now. It's a fair deal, we believe, and we can have a 5 to 7 year agreement, but it is going to mean next year increasing some costs in transportation. And once transportation costs increase, they increase for special education, they increase for everything else as well. Some of those increases in transportation and in like special education, that 200% increase and sort of, that goes into the default budget. So it's not as though it's not there. Those are mandatory costs. As long as we can make the argument for it to be mandatory, which that certainly would, and we know that goes into the default budget. But those are areas of increase. We can go to the next one. Now, we have been able to do some decreasing. In the last several years, we've been looking at trend data, and we did take out some of that trend data, about 70,000 in student services, some trend reduction. We consistently have anywhere between 250,000, 450,000 around there, and anything in between. I would say over the last 9 to 10 years, that in staffing. Over the last 3 to 4 years, we've had a lot of money to give back, and it has been in the area of special ed staffing, student services staffing. the issue is, and it's not just a this year issue, it was a last year issue, it was a year before year issue, and it was a year before that. And the reason why we've been able to give back money is because we haven't been able to hire certain types of positions. And so they've been left open during that time frame. We have some very skilled people on the SAU, the coordinators, the director, so forth, who go in and fill a lot of those areas. Sometimes we have principals who do the same thing. We have other teachers covering. This school district has done a very nice job making sure that it has still provided the education that it is needed to, but not at, but at an expense, at a person expense. We are at a spot where that's even increased a little bit more. And so you'll see that we've taken some $70,000 just purely out of trends, saying we're likely to be able to take that out. We've also removed another 182,000 in student service trends in a different area. So some of it's out of staffing, some of it's out of other areas. So it's a total of $250,000 we've removed, and it's not been out of a specific area. We've just taken that because of trend information. In years past, we've been able to remove a little bit more than that. There is a trend data stoppage that's going to take place, and I guarantee it, that's going to shift some of that information, and the reason why we didn't go any further. We currently have, I think we told the school last week, it was like 10 or more open positions in the instructional associates. These are all tied to student IEPs and so forth. We have struggled to keep people. Obviously, the job market right now is just making that even more difficult. And while we are providing the services, we're finding a way to do it. It's not as though we're doing it in a way that we feel the most proud of. And so we are in this budget, this is a zero or, within 5,000 or so, either way. Might be a tad savings actually, but this is pretty much a zero hit to the budget. We are saying, let's do things differently. We have a need. There's research to support a little bit of a switch. We've talked about inclusive education. Our numbers of kids who need extra services happen to fit into various pockets for the first time in the last several years, where we can do some pilot programs and collect data and set goals in the area of co-teaching. Two classes at Ringe, one at Jaffrey grade school, and then one specifically targeted in the area of literacy at the high school here. And so hiring 4 teachers, believe it or not, as long as we go out at the right time, is a lot more likely than hiring at any time, apparently, instructional associates. And then of course, instructional associates sometimes are offered different jobs, as we've seen this year, and they take other jobs midstream. There's a little more staying power with teachers. That's another piece. What we expect is that those reasons for giving back those funds in last year, for certain last year, in previous years, that reason will by and large be removed. Now, there are still some other positions that could be, another 50,000 or 60,000 overage, but not as much as we would see in the past. So I think if we go to the next slide. There are other warrant articles. I say possible. I'm not mentioning the warrant articles here. We're not looking over language here tonight or anything. But things to consider, because they impact this. While we're talking about a proposed budget, and if that proposed budget became a approved budget, there's then an adopted budget that takes place, which then there are other warrants will go into that. And so JREA CBA, we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. There's some potential JRSSA adjustments. More conversation needs to be had about that. There have been, everyone's been an interesting year where we've seen a lot of the needs. We're going to have a conversation about facilities. We took $1 million out of our original budget, and those none of the things we took out were things we did not need. We got to find a way to do the work and not ignore it and not pass it down year after year. We could talk about the special ed reserve fund. We do have 400,000 in it. Maintenance reserve funds depleted. So those are some conversations that we will need to continue to have. The staffing, I had made a statement in there that really we're talking about not doing a whole lot with staffing. There could be some positions perhaps that we change as we continue to look at the data so that we're providing the best education that our community needs, but it wouldn't be removing current people, like having to necessarily rift individuals or anything of that nature. That would not be the plan or any idea in our movement going forward. There was something else, but I lost it, so we'll go from there. Okay. Any questions?
Yes, Ruben.
Mhm.
I think you mentioned earlier that you had a very large increase in the cost of special education this
Mhm.
year. What was the effect on the special education reserve? Was it necessary to draw down on that? Or?
We have not drawn down on that. We would have brought that to the board here. We have not had to. I will say that it's possible that it's going to need to take place. I think Carrie and Jen have spent a lot of time trying to find out where money has to be shifted and so forth. We've done that with facilities this year. I mean, I've depleted the entire curriculum account to, at least for temporary purposes, to be able to fund facilities work that we had to do. We found out just this past week that we're not going to get reimbursed for certain pipe work that was done, that any piping that was underneath the ground. So we've had to, more than any other year, really spend a lot of time trying to figure out where we can pay for certain things and then wait. Our ability to pay right away has been hindered. Do we have money to cover some of these expenses? Well, I said that we have not hired 8, 9, 10 instructional associates. That's not a good thing, by the way. And I do have some that we're going to hire, some part-time ones. Yay, that's going to be fantastic, but that only helps a little bit. But those costs were budgeted for and they're still in there. And so there are some funds that we have been able to use from that exist in those areas to that spot. I don't know if we have enough of those funds to cover some of those costs. So it is possible. It is not our desire to go and take out of that, draw out of that account. We're doing everything we can to make sure we're not doing that. But I know that psychological service costs, as I put up there, out of district costs have been high. Speech, throw that in the mix. Hard to find a speech language pathologist. We do have some on staff. We have more. I mean, speech is usually one of the services that you need to provide the most, especially at the younger years. So we do have members in the audience who are administration in those areas that might have a more recent picture of that, like today. Is what I said the most accurate, or would you say there's something else to add to that? And there's a microphone there if possible. Yep. While she's doing that, I remembered what I was going to say. We did add 4 positions to the budget in the, as permanent subs. So those 4 that we were hiring this year, we put that would be new to that budget. That would be a staffing switch. We did not take those out. Okay.
No, I just wanted to add about where student services stands today and the budget. So looking at the budget, we have about $810,000 remaining in our budget. We usually have more than that at this point in time in the year, and student services needs about $680,000 to finish the year. So that 810,000 does not include some money that the board already voted for the unassigned fund balance retention that we had last fiscal year. So the 800,000 is really a little bit more than that when you count that money. But just so you know where we stand right now, there has to be a lot of transfers needed to be done in order to move money around right now without using the special ed trust fund. Do you want to add anything?
Thank you for the question, John.
Other questions for Ruben? Or any of the administrators you might have specific questions for?
I just, Patty, I want to say thank you for looking into the HR area. That has been something that I've talked about a lot in the last 3 years and as a concern area. I also know that if it were to happen, it would be adding, staffing not directly associated with education and curriculum. And I know that's a tension that we have quite a lot of people on that side of the fence. And I hope that we don't lose that idea in the future if things were different and we didn't have increases in student services. So I think it's short-sighted to have one person in that role for a district this size and with all the machinations that have to go on. And I super appreciate the efficiency with which all of you have worked to streamline HR and the business office using the e-documents. And I know that's probably helped quite a lot, but it's really detrimental to have only one person in an area that serves so many people. So I appreciate all of the other stuff you said, but that's just my piece on that.
Yeah, and just to kind of say what we're trying to do, and I would say it's not where you want to go, but we do have a need for, and we've been trying for the past 3 months to hire someone for the business office and make sure that the facilities has the support that they need. We want to continue doing that, but readjust what we're looking for in the business office to account for some support for HR. It just would not be the level that we would want, or it could grow into that perhaps. Maybe that's an idea if you could find the right person, but it would be at least a step. And I think we need to make a step.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any others? Okay.
So just one last comment on this, and I will be done. There are patterns, other patterns that exist within the district. We have for several years in a row been able to purchase equipment out of existing budgets that we could utilize this year that would be planned for in the budget for future years. Laptops, computers, things of that nature. There are other areas that if we needed to forego flooring and carpet and paint for a year, you could knock another 60,000 out of there. We could probably find another 150, maybe 200 if we were to look at things, to purchase if there were things you really shouldn't pre-purchase, but if there are things that we could utilize right now, then that's a possibility of getting that $750,000 down to closer to that $500,000 area. Closer.
Good. Thanks to everyone who's been working on this. It's not a fun task. It's a big one. And I'm looking forward to next Monday when we really dive in. Okay. I think we're ready to move on to the bus contract.
I had a question, and I'm not sure if this is time to it. Crawford.
Is it Carl?
It is Carl.
Okay. Hi, Carl.
Thank you. And I'm not sure where this fits in, or it should be next week or whatever, but I'm concerned about the fund balance to reduce taxes. It looks like you had a surplus over the last 4 years of over $1 million. This year, last year, as you gave back around 600,000 per year, at one point almost $1 million. And this year you're only giving back 200,000. Yet we look at the tax rate that just came out, and the town has reduced theirs by 10 cents. The county has reduced by a penny. The schools for states, 4 cents. And this district is up 35 cents. If these numbers were reversed and you gave back 800, I don't think that could be done. But if you were to give 8,000 and keep 400,000, you would have basically no increase in terms of the money that is being reserved. So basically, I think you're up 2.6%. That's around 675,000. If that were given back to the taxpayers, this, you would be at an even budget in terms of the tax rate. And the problem we have, the voters, when they go to vote for the town budget, are looking where the tax rate's going up. And we're only 1/6 of the budget, less than 17%. You guys are almost 60%. And so you, in a sense, drive the taxes far more than we do, but we get the blame, if you wish. We're right now operating on the default budget. And if we have to, we're looking just try to get our budget passed next year. So this makes it difficult for the towns, to get their budget. We have been on a very tight budget for the last 5 years, 6 years. Flat budget's not healthy. We suffer as a town for it. And we're trying to get our salaries up competitive, but this makes it very difficult. And we need that, return to the taxpayer part, because what it does is it makes our budget passable and perhaps yours. So, thank you.
Thanks, Carl. So,
Carl, do you have the most current portion of history?
I've got what was sent to me by the school district.
Okay, it has been revised.
Perhaps. So this is what I'm dealing with.
The one online is, you're dealing with the $200.
Yeah. It's basically up 35 cents. And I guess we're able to get it down even So we had 0 increase, which would be great. If you got it down 20 cents, the state, the county, and the town are helping cover you. So it's just a thought, and it's going to make it hard to pass the budget.
Charlie, was there more you wanted to say, or is that?
No, I'll take it offline with Carl and explain things. But
Okay.
There are a few adjustments to that.
There's been some adjustments since the stuff was sent to Carl. I'll just share what those are.
Okay. All right, so now we're ready for the bus contract? I think it's the second tab, yeah.
All right. Carrie may need to help me out on this a little bit, as she's been working on this for a bit of time with the owners. Our owners of the bus company that took over from Joel year, probably at the worst time ever to take over anything, have been really wonderful to work with. They've at several instances have been able to come and talk with us and converse, and we've been able to problem solve even this year with the shortage of bus drivers, to be able to come up with a solution to decrease the number of runs and still be able to do everything that we've needed. You know, it's been a challenging year, and they've really been right there with us. And so I want to thank them. They've provided us some data. We verified their data. We called around as well. We did our own homework to find out what we could, just to make certain before we present any choices to anybody that, you know, we've done our homework. If we go to the next slide. Over the years, like I said, for the past several years, we've come into budgets below default. We've done everything we possibly can trend wise to remove funds to be able to keep our budgets as flat or as small an increase as possible. Part of what has helped is that our bus contracts have been fairly stable. Year after year, I think there was a time when we had like a 1% increase, and things were flat for a period of time as well, but certainly not increasing at all in any sort of way like our regional partners or across the state have been seeing. And so our current owners would like to, over a period of years, get closer to a level where it is more, you know, on the average side of things, a little bit more to market value. And so they provided us several options. Those options were presented to the finance committee. The finance committee looked at them and did have a suggestion. So if there's anyone from the finance committee, once we get to that spot, you can talk to what you remember on that issue. We do think that it would be wise to enter into a long-term agreement. Busing right now is very unstable. Bus companies, if we go to the next slide, you can see that we are that bottom data point compared to what everyone else is spending in that area. That kind of line is where that average is. Those other data points, the blues, the reds, the greens, those are all areas, those are all schools as well. So Amherst and Conval and other places. Now, there are differences in contracts. Not all of these places have contracts that some of the contracts require fuel, like, so we pay for fuel in addition to the contract. Others have the fuel included. Regardless, we've definitely had a nice 6 to 7 year deal, and that's really helped our district significantly. And so we appreciate our current owners and the previous owner as well for helping take care of our district in this way and providing excellent service at the same time. Even though we have had some difficulties with busing this year, like everyone else has, we have had less than many. So still the service has been fantastic. You can see, Carrie, the blue and the red. What is the difference between the blue and the red? If you can go to the mic and talk about the differences there. I believe it has to do with the type of contract that is, with whether you're paying fuel or not.
Yes, that's correct. The red districts are the ones, or the red dots are the districts that pay their own fuel separately, so it's not included in the contract. The blue ones have fuel included in their contracts. So I've spoken to other districts, and many of those contracts are capped at certain dollar amounts, so they would pay any fuel above those caps anyway. The green dot just was the information wasn't available.
And so you can see the closest dot, I'm trying to think, is that, I can't read it from here. The second one in there, the second.
That's Peterborough. Condell.
Peterborough, is it at 315? And we're at 265, I think, per run. So you can see that there's a pretty good difference between those. So if we go to the next slide. We start talking about options A and B. And actually, Carrie, because you're just better with all of this, if you could just stay up there at the mic and talk about the differences between these lines. Some of these options, there's options A, there's option B, there's option C, D, I think there's an E as well.
Right. So these are based on the average daily rates for a run. So blue is basically in our area, the average daily rates. The red line, again, is for, or orange, it looks kind of orange, for the ones that have pay their own fuel separately. And then we have options A and B that the transportation company provided. So option A has higher increases in the first few years. It goes 3 years with a 2-year option. So it's showing on the graph 5 years out, which would include the 2-year option. Option B is 5-year commitment with the bus company. So you see lower increases each year until you reach and become the same with option A. So you're in a sense paying more with option A because you're having increases in the beginning that you don't have later on, that option B brings you up to anyway. If you go back to the other slide, I don't need you to go back to the other slide, Nick. It has the total annual amounts per year. So you can look at that and see what the total commitments are. Option C and D are not on here. Option C is the same as option B. It just gives us the ability to extend the contract 2 more years at set percentages for different rates. And then option D is a 6-year commitment with a 1-year option, and overall the district spending more money than the other options here. That help?
Yep. You go to the next slide. Oh, is that the last slide?
No, there was one more. There was one more that I had added. Ruben, it should be on the Google Sheets.
Give me
I added
a
today.
second and I'll search through my email.
It would be an
Google
important slide. Yes, while we're waiting for that, questions on this so far?
Carrie, I recall that there was a question of the percentage increase in the first 2 years for option C. Were you able to talk that over, and can you tell us where that ended up?
So I'm going to give you just for the regular education transportation, because the percentages vary depending on which run you're talking about.
Okay,
So for option A, the first year increase in the daily rate is 9.7%. Option B, the increase is 4.5%. And option C would be the same, because option C is the same as option B, except for the last 2 years that we would have we would have an option for an additional 2 more years.
okay.
And that slides up for you
And
now, Carrie.
then option D, the first year increase is actually 1.7, but the next year is 10.3. So it's lower the first year, but then it jumps up.
Okay. And what is the option that you're recommending?
The finance committee met, the option we were recommending was option C.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we met with the bus company last week to discuss some language within the contract as well, to look for some more flexibility in certain areas. So we're having good conversations and we're moving forward with that, which is nice. But certainly the sooner we could enter into an agreement or be known that we can enter into agreement with the financial piece here, the better, so that we can finish off some of the other nuts and bolts of it. Certainly, we want to answer any questions you have. It's an increase that we're going to have to, have. But you can see through the graphs that Carrie went through in the previous slide that it still puts us below that orange line over a series of years. And that orange line depicts other places that have similar style contracts.
So can you show the 4 again? The last one? That one. So I'm just curious. So option C, it says it's option B plus a 2-year option. So I'm not sure why the numbers are different.
Oh, so Marcia, you and I are the same. We don't look at the very top. So I had the same question earlier today, just because I knew this was presented in a different format than what I had seen before. So the average daily rate includes optional years. So if you look at the very top, it says average daily rate.
Yeah.
And so that's averaging in 2 more years.
2 more years worth. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not that next year we wouldn't be paying that amount.
Got it.
Over.
That's what it would. Okay. All right.
Yeah, so that's why.
Got it.
That's a fantastic question.
This is Patty. I'm going to voice something because I have a feeling that if there's anyone online that's watching this, they're going to say it and I'm saying it because it's irrelevant. And what I'm going to say is that, but wait, so fewer kids are using the bus. And so it's just a fixed cost. It's like the buildings, it's like the lights, it's like all these other things. And regardless of how many kids are on the bus, we still have to make transportation available. And, whether the kid is out on the corner one day and they take a car the next day or they walk the next day, it's irrelevant. So I'm just putting it out there because if we were to divide this by the number of students who actually use the bus, it'd be astronomical. So we won't do that because it's irrelevant. So I'm just putting it out there because I know that that's the angst that you're going to have people wringing their hands, but it doesn't matter. We need to make the service available to get the kids to come to school. Right?
Yep. And I will say, again, this year, these numbers and everything is based upon 12 runs. We've had 13 runs for years. And we had known that there was probably the capacity of doing that work, and they did that this year to reduce this. So if this would be higher in total cost had we continued on that same trajectory. So the bus company has worked with us to decrease the number, make things more efficient, so that while costs are increasing, we're trying to not increase it by as much. So I want to thank them for that. The Ringe, as for ridership, I think the Jaffrey Grade School has pretty good ridership. I would say Ringe Memorial School has the strongest ridership. I mean, it's hard to walk there. So a lot of kids ride the bus at RMS. And yes, at this school right here, it is lower.
I just wanted to.
It's not uncommon to see 10 on a bus, for instance.
Doesn't matter. Just putting it out there. Hear
Yeah.
it, don't
Yeah.
need it to get it.
So is this something we need to have a motion for?
Well, just two things. One is transportation is required by statute.
Right,
actually,
that's
by
what I'm saying.
DOE rules. Okay. So we have to provide transportation.
Right.
And then the second thing is that there is some flexibility. The flexibility has to do with the number of runs. They charge us so much per run, okay, based on the type of run. So if we expand our athletics, for example, and require more bus runs, it's going to cost more money. If our student volume goes down and we can consolidate bus routes, then our cost goes down. So there is some flexibility.
So are there other questions? Is there a motion?
Well, the finance committee did recommend option B,
Option
See,
See.
C.
option C, which is basically option B plus the option tacked on to the end to extend the contract for, I believe it was around 3%, something like that,
3.5, I think. Yeah.
3.5%. So
And so Carrie, the motion exactly that you would want to see as the person who is responsible for our audits and so forth, to make sure that the motion's in the minutes properly.
So the motion would be to waive the bid requirements and to award the transportation contract, option C, to community transportation and authorize the superintendent to execute the contract.
So it's motion to waive the bid requirements.
I make a motion that we waive the bid requirements,
Mhm.
that we award, that we enter into, or we go with option C, that we enter into the bid with
Agreement. Yep.
transportation.
Yep.
And that we authorize Reuben Duncan to sign the contract.
To execute it.
Execute the
Execute
contract.
the
Yep.
contract.
Which would involve a signature at some point.
Yes. Okay, so that's our motion. How about a second? Thank you. All right, John,
Aye.
thank you. Lisa,
Aye.
thank you. Christine,
Aye.
thank you. Charlie,
Aye.
thank you. Patty,
Aye.
thank you. Alicia,
Yes.
thank you. I say aye. So that passes 7-0-0. We have a contract.
Okay, this puts it in a default budget, correct? No. Following year.
Yeah.
Okay, on to the ratification of the.
Well, student services default. Yeah. So if it has to do with the increases for student service riding, legal reasons, then yes. But the rest of it, no.
Okay,
Well, how much is that? For the budget?
The amount that is extra to our proposed operating budget, that is different from what's added to the default. Am I correct in saying that's
Is this in our proposed budget?
70,000, is it?
Okay, so it doesn't impact the proposed budget.
Mhm. I think it's around 70,000. On here, it says 65,376 on my document that I'm looking at. for our choices. Nope, that's different. That's CHS. My apologies. I looked at it says transportation, but that's entirely different. Okay, yeah, if you can get that at some point, that would be fine.
So did Charlie's question get answered?
No,
Okay,
not correctly.
okay. So are we now ready to move on to the JREA contract? Or are we still working on this?
We can go back to answer Charlie's question at another time if we want to keep on going. If in my thoughts, if that's okay with everyone else.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
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 All right, the JREA proposed collective bargaining agreement was ratified by the membership, the JREA membership, and it goes to the board for a vote of accepting this, ratifying this. The board members and a couple of individuals from the SAU negotiated a contract. So board members were Charlie, Patty, and Alicia. And we actually had a fairly quick negotiation as negotiations go since I've been here. I think it was very constructive. It was polite. We had a lot of data that we looked at. We went back and forth on several issues, and we came to what we believe is a fair agreement. Our teachers have done, and everyone who's in that bargaining unit, teachers includes speech, also nurses and other individuals who work with students in our school, just have done a phenomenal job over the last 6 years that I've been here. Certainly the last year and a half to 2 years in particular has been amazing, to say the least. And so I'm really excited that we were able to come to this agreement, but not every one of you has seen this. So I want to go through it a little bit, and it's your decision of how we want to progress forward.
Could members of the bargaining unit make a motion?
Yeah, absolutely. So there were several key language changes. This first slide shows an addition of parental leave, some benefit increases, and some professional development flexibility. So new to the contract, and there's a longer paragraph that goes along with this. You'll see the little dots there. So at the beginning, we have employees shall be provided with 10 days of paid parental leave after the birth or adoption of a child. Later on in that paragraph, paid parental leave shall run concurrently with other leave taken in connection with the birth or adoption of a child. So this is a new thing that has been added to the contract, a new benefit, and it's for individuals who, as it states up there, adopt or have the birth of a child. The next language piece, you can see there about insurance opt-out. There was really not much of a change here. It was just a change in language that last part, that it's prorated based upon the portion of the year employed, meaning if someone doesn't take the offered health insurance and they can prove that they have health insurance, then in the past, if they've worked the entire year, they get the $1,000 buyback. If they came, say, halfway through the year, they would not get anything the way it was written previously. So now they would get half of it if they came halfway through the year. Life insurance hadn't increased for a long period of time, and so we were able to increase it from 40 to 50,000. Teachers using their prep time. This is just a change in number that's been there a long time. It's went from $30 to $35 an hour. I will say thank you to those individuals, though it's not ideal. I want to thank those individuals who have been using their prep time this year when they feel like they are able to do so, to help us out with some of the shortages that we've had with substitutes and so forth. And then the last one is school nurses and allied health professionals. often have professional development needs that are a little bit different than the majority of their bargaining units. So giving them some flexibility on being able to get the professional development that they need. We can go to the next slide. This key language changes has specific to do with stipends. So change in the number of the longevity payment, not a definition of the longevity payment, but the amount that they would get at the each year, 2022, 23, and then 23, 24. That was put in the last negotiations. This whole concept was put in there. Special education teachers have increasingly a different type of work scenario. And so they will get a differential of 1,000. Administration may require nurses and guidance counselors to work more beyond the school year, within the summertime. So they would get paid at their per diem. There would be music teachers. We found that there was a little bit of a discrepancy between how music teachers were paid throughout the district. They were, but they had different numbers of events that they were responsible for. And so this makes it kind of equal across the board. That being said, they have to have their principal's approval prior to moving forward. And it's not like, hey, I'm going to have an event, you know, after school tomorrow, and then, you know, suddenly we're responsible for providing a stipend for that. And then this year, actually, even in the middle of this year, we've already had this experience with some of the HVAC work that we have going on, unpacking rooms, moving rooms around. As we have space issues at times when there's work, or there needs to be people relocating to different areas, or they're relocating because of different grade levels that they're going to be teaching the next year, paying them a day for their time to get their room situated. And we can move on to the next slide. Thanks. And then we added a student loan repayment clause in here. If members want to talk about any of the rationale for some of this, you can, but that's in there, and it's a benefit for our teachers. Typically newer teachers to the district who are coming in it's not a secret that many individuals have come into their jobs over the past 10 to 20 years with very high student loan debt. And so to help alleviate that, we can go to the next slide. And so these last couple of slides, I think there's maybe 3 slides, but 2 of them are the proposed salary scales for the next year, if this were to pass, and then the following one. I will commend the school board and the JREA over the last 2 negotiations that we had over these past 6 years, that we were really able to find ways together to get the step 1 or the bottom of our scale up and being very competitive. Actually, that's and I think we're going to remain. This keeps us competitive in that area, and also supporting everyone throughout the entire those who are covered by this agreement. So if we go to the following slide. Is there another slide there? Okay. There was not another slide there. Basically, it would have said that there was not an entire warrant article, but there would have been a piece of the warrant article would have said that in the first year it would be a $455,000 amount, and then the second year will be about a $390,000 amount. So over 2 years, you add those 2 together, and that's what it would end up being. But the bigger increase would be in the first year.
All right. Are there questions for anyone on the negotiations?
Can I just ask a semantic question? on this proposed salary scale, what does N stand for?
N is the nurses lane. And so that actually, you bring up a great question because N differs from the B+0 category.
Mhm.
In the past, the bachelor's lane and the nurses lane were identical. You'll see that this is $1,000 higher, the nurses lane now at every single step than the bachelor's lane. And that was to account for the fact that the nurses don't and haven't, as far as I know, ever gone across the scale that way. And so, but we did recognize that nurses are extraordinarily important to the running of our schools. And so that was done. Plus the language about working in the summertime to do some of the work that they typically do and getting paid for it. And the professional development side of things to give more flexibility to them.
Any other questions?
Moving where it says that those people who are required to work in the summer will be paid per diem. Does that, what exactly is the definition of per diem?
Their per diem that year. So if, for instance, they were to, let's say a nurse was to come and do some work for us, quite a bit of probably data work during the summertime to get ready for the fall athletic season. Now, it's before the typical school year, but it's within that same fiscal year. So they would get whatever their, whatever is in that, whatever step and lane they're in, divided by the number of days that are outlined in the contract. I think it's like 186. And then that's their per diem. And then you would add, if they work 5 days, multiply that by 5. So if their per diem's $250 and they worked 5 days, they would get, $1,250.
Yep, thank you.
Mhm. Marcia, we
What?
have a question from one of the representatives,
Budget?
Laurel. Yep, would that be okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so will the full CBA language be available for Monday night? In which case I don't need to have questions tonight.
I have a draft document with all, this is language, this is direct language from the CBA. So these are only the changes. So what do you
Okay.
mean? Like,
Okay, so
We need a full document signed by both the chair
Mhm.
and the lead negotiators for KREA.
yes.
Complete document.
Mhm.
I believe that's what Laurel's asking for.
Oh, by this coming Monday?
A week from today.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. If you guys approve this right here, ratify this movement, then we would make the final document and get it signed.
and the final document is the red line of the current contract migrating to the new contract.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
We can get you the red line copy today.
Yeah, I have a red light
Okay.
copy.
What we really need though is a brand new contract signed by both parties
Without the red lines.
without the red lines.
Yep.
That's what we're gonna need for distribution, for the deliberative session and public hearing.
All right. So there's no more questions. If someone wants to make a motion,
I'll make a motion to accept the CBA for the proposed years.
okay.
I will second Lisa's motion.
Okay, thank you.
There are
Thank you.
just for the discussion, there are just a couple other items that are new to that CBA that I didn't list up here because they were just really time-based structures. One of them was around making sure that the calendar for the next year is provided to the JREA, that they have some, you know, there's some timetables around conversation around the following year's calendar, school calendar. Very similar to what we already do. And then another one changes some dates of when the summer contracts get hired, the PERK projects. They were pretty early in that March, April timeframe. And so these, they wanted a little bit later of a time frame in the May and June timeframe, but really no change to procedure or anything else.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion from Lisa, a second from Alicia. So, John,
Aye.
thank you. Lisa,
Aye.
thank you. Christine,
Aye.
thank you. Charlie,
Aye.
thank you. Patty,
Aye.
thank you. Alicia,
Yes.
thank you. I say aye, and that contract is accepted. 700. Okay. Board committee updates. Facilities, is there anything?
Yes, we have a budget gap. A lot of things we'd like to do, and we're going to be looking actively for where we're going to get the money to do them, to keep our aging buildings in good shape and functioning for the decades to come. Charlie, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, you said it all. We have 50-year-old plumbing that's coming apart. We got to replace the fixtures for that. We've got ADA compliance issues because we have doors that that handicapped people can't open and they're rusting apart. We have issues with mold because our HVAC systems don't dehumidify. We've got all kinds of issues where it's costing us money because we're not repairing the facilities the way we should be repairing them. So I think you said it appropriately, yeah.
And I'll add that these aren't things that just suddenly happened overnight. They're things that have been there, and now we have the facilities director who's really making a red line through everything that's, you know, a punch list, if you would, and prioritizing them. And the committee has spent a considerable amount of time discussing those priorities and what order they need to be in. So these are the highest priorities, maybe not the most inexpensive things, but they are things we need to get off our plates.
The facilities are like a peeling an onion.
Yeah, so we're crying the
Yeah,
whole time.
every time you peel a layer off, you find something else, something new that you hadn't anticipated.
All right. Okay, thank you, facilities. Does finance have anything to add? I mean, kind of was all about finance tonight, but is there anything else that you want to add?
No, just to thank the members of the Finance Committee for all the work they did trying to review the budget and provide input to the budget and warrant articles.
All right, thank you. The Education Committee is going to meet on Thursday at 4 o'clock. And we're going to be hearing from the middle school, high school team on the pathways that they're working on. And policy, when are you
There are
meeting?
no updates at this moment for policy.
Say that again.
There are no updates at this moment.
When's your next meeting?
We are not sure.
Okay,
They're between holidays and other meetings and budget meetings, we're kind of running out of.
running out
options.
of dates. All right,
I will say that though not talking about board policy, we do have some work going on with technology policies right now,
okay. Great,
more
Thanks.
internal to the district. Some of it might be board policy at some point in time.
okay. All right. We're at public comments. Number 2.
Marcia,
Yeah,
I think the Wellness Committee has been doing some things, and I was wondering if maybe
sure,
Christie
sure.
would like to
Yeah,
say
yeah.
something.
Sorry.
That's
I was
okay.
just looking at board committees and not the broader. I don't know if communication's done something too, so we'll check in with Nick after I listen to you. Sorry.
So reviewing the purpose of the Wellness Committee, we've definitely realized that healthy food is a major component of access to healthy food is a major component of our school district, and the Wellness Committee has a responsibility of reviewing the food that is being served to our learners and their access to healthy food. And one of the approaches that we've taken is to visit some of our school gardens and to look into ways of possibly reviving them, doing some site visits and seeing if that is an approach to increase access, like I said, to healthy food for learners. That's about all we've done at this point, though. is
Okay,
to view the gardens.
all right.
Mhm.
All right, quick update on communication is that at this point in time, there is no update on communication. I would love to schedule a meeting and discuss everything that we have going on, but just trying to find a time that I can even plan out some dates for people. So as soon as I have a free moment, I will certainly schedule.
All right. Great. Thank you so much. Okay, now public comment number 2.
All right, so I'm back. I'm just going to pop the policy back on the screen. So as usual, whether you're in person, whether you're remote, you're free to make a public comment, provided you adhere to this policy: first name, last name, town of residence. If you are in person, obviously you can just, wave at me. If you are digital, you can digitally wave at me by using the raise hand feature, and we can acknowledge you that way. All right, anybody in house want to make a comment? All right, so we have nobody in house, and I guess we'll give another couple seconds to the digital audience. All right, we do have 2 people that have raised their hands.
Okay.
So first we have George Quill.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Hi, George.
Hello there. Again, I'd like to recognize the difficulty that the board and Ruben has to balance the community's calmer folks, as well as the folks who are paralyzed by fear. Of course, my comments are all directed towards the masking and the emergency authority that was already voted on. The budgetary stuff, I'll set aside for another day. It's good. Obviously, the only thing I agreed with today was to keep people informed and to poll the community again and get the community's input. Because if you remember at the beginning, good Lord, last summer when we were polled originally, overwhelmingly, the majority wanted no measures. Really and I feel confident in saying overwhelmingly. However, right before school we had an emergency meeting that presented us with a matrix that we didn't want. And I can appreciate that. The effort, not just to let it, sit and do nothing. And while a lot of us disagreed, okay, so the matrix is there. And now here we are a few months in, and we're approving temporary powers for Ruben to say, well, masks now, masks till I say 5 days, we'll reevaluate 5 days. And I'm sure the 5 days will never extend to another 5 days because we're only 15 days to slow the spread. So I know we'll never get an extension on that. It's purely emergency and will never go away. Problem I have is with the tyranny of minority that I mentioned the last meeting, but I don't know if anyone heard me, and the Venn diagram of people with tyrannical inclinations between the informed, uninformed, calm, and crippled by fear would be an interesting exercise. And I think the uninformed and crippled by fear would be the vast majority of people with the tyrannical inclinations. So it's, not tyranny like put on the mask is the tyranny I'm describing in particular, which was funny because a board member tonight, surprisingly but not surprisingly, indicated such a technocratic authoritarian position that he was disappointed in Ruben. I don't think we're supposed to name names, but that he was disappointed that Ruben didn't enforce his rules based on the data that he accepted. That board member has also dispensed information that was absolutely incorrect. So that's a clear indication that boards like this that are not medical in nature shouldn't even have input as to medical decisions for the community. Right? His data is his data, and I appreciate that he can have and believe his data, but he's unqualified to determine it when there's well-versed, qualified people that have said things to the contrary, including the CDC and the WHO. Obviously, the government, even the vaccine companies that made the vaccines, we know a lot of things have moved on since the beginning. Now, a problem I see with the masking is we've moved from last year was protect yourself, put on the mask. Everyone needs to, panic and have fear and stay home or wear the mask to protect yourself, to the position that we've seen some board members take, as well as parents take, that says you need to put the mask on to protect the other people. Now that's a dangerous precedent. That burdens you with the responsibility of theoretically someone else's life, right? If you don't wear a mask, it's an implied act of violence against another person to which someone might respond to. Because if someone acted violently towards you, you'd certainly be within your rights to react to that perceived act of violence.
So
Now,
George,
yes.
You've been talking for about 4
Let me
minutes
just
now.
give me a tiny bit more to riff. I'm almost done, and then nobody
Please.
else is on the line anyways.
Well,
so-
there is someone else that's waiting.
Okay, well,
and-
the other person, divide by 2, we call it 7.5 minutes. So we have situations I've heard reported of where a teacher, we don't name, that has recommended they have comorbidities, as do I myself personally, more than one, and they're my own fault. What are you gonna do? It's life. They say you should put on your mask because I have comorbidities, and God forbid something happens to me, and then the implication is there. So now we're burdening our children with that teacher might die. Maybe not. Doesn't matter. It's a kid's thought. If that kid has the propensity for depression or other issues, they might blame themselves for the teacher's death or I wouldn't say the fellow student's death, because students basically have 100% chance of survival. everyone else has a 99% chance of survival.
15 seconds.
So I didn't hear that last thing.
I said 15 seconds.
Oh, 15 seconds. 5 seconds. Reclaiming my time. If the person feels responsible for the other person's death that they did not cause, that is certainly not healthy to the students of this school. It's clear, it's clear, it's clear. The masks don't do anything unless it's a custom fitted N95 medical mask. There's no argument there in the medical community, the government, anywhere else. The paper things don't do anything.
Oh, you're over
I
your
get your
time
time.
now.
I
Thanks.
get you. Thank you for the time.
Yep.
Hi, Jennifer Clark again from Jaffrey. You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So, I don't know if I've told you guys before, I've been in the medical field for quite some time. Let's say since I graduated at Conan. I won't give you how many years, but all I'm going to say concerning issues, I think that the medical advice is out there. Whether you choose to follow it or not is your decision. As far as masks, I have to agree with one of the school board members earlier when she stated safety is not only about masks. Masking is one of the preventive measures that we can do. We can still spread. Cleaning is one of the most important things we can do. Hand sanitizing is one of the most important things we can do. There are several other things we can do besides masking to help protect our students and protect ourselves. And yes, everybody is getting COVID burnt out at this time, and I completely get it and I completely understand it. But now, with New Hampshire being one of, well, is the country with the highest amount of cases at this point, or increasing in cases, I should say, that is the time where we actually want to step up our protocols and make our kids safer. With that being said, quick story. My daughter came home sick on Friday. She had 102 fever. She had a migraine headache. She was vomiting. Needless to say, I had to bring her to the ER on the recommendation of her pediatrician. She was COVID tested. She was flu tested. There were other tests done as well. She did not have COVID. However, it's very hard to differentiate between that. Our nurses are doing a wonderful job at that. There is another virus going around the school district as well with all of those same symptoms. You can't really tell the difference because the symptoms overlap so much. Now, with that being said, I did speak to members in the medical community at the hospital, and that consisted of 2 doctors and 2 nurses who were quite concerned about the situation with our school district. They did not understand several issues. So I guess my question being, has anybody actually reached out to, say, Monadnock Community Hospital? And, you know, I know we were talking about increases at hospital numbers. Has anybody reached out to them to see what their suggestions would be? Because at this point, the doctors and nurses there were absolutely like, I don't understand why your school district isn't even shut down and cleaning and quarantining everybody for 10 days. That is directly what I got told from a physician. So my question being, maybe we should be reaching out to the medical community and seeing, well, no, it's not just about masks, but maybe you could give us other suggestions where we could try to keep our students safer, because the mask issue is a issue of contention between our 2 towns, and I understand everybody has their own opinions, and that's quite all right. But I think we need to look at the full picture and not just masking.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and as stated, those were the two folks that we had for the second session.
All right, thank you very much, Nick. Any board matters or future items?
I just want to remind everyone of the music concert that's this Thursday. It's at 6:30 in the Pratt, and I applaud our musical students and in terms of persevering in the last 18 months, and I hope everyone can come and really support them in their endeavors and their instructors.
Thanks, Patty. Anything else? All right, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Lisa?
Thank you, Lisa. I need a second.
I'll second her motion.
All right, thank you. And we're adjourned